Hi, my name is Joseph Rivers, and the purpose of this speech is to inform you about the 2017 electronic logging mandate. The electronic logging mandate that took effect in December of 2017 is intended to further reduce the number of deaths and injuries on U.S. highways by better enforcing hours of service regulations already in place. And suppose that you or one of your family members, or your entire family for that matter, is driving along the highway on your way to your favorite vacation destination. Now imagine that you and your children are having a great time playing road games such as Slug Bug or singing 99 bottles of beer on the wall for that matter, when suddenly an 80,000-pound truck carrying a load of bricks crosses the median, slamming into the 4,600-pound minivan that you rented to get to Disneyland, killing most of your family and forever damaging those that might manage to survive. How could such a thing happen? What could have happened to make a professional driver just lose control of his vehicle in the middle of the day and destroy an entire family? Sadly, this type of thing happens way more often than we ever hear about. As a matter of fact, a total of 3,986 people died in large truck accidents in 2016, 17% of which were truck drivers. Another 66% were occupants of cars and other passenger vehicles. Another 16% were pedestrian, bicyclists, or motorcyclists. A great deal of drivers involved in incidents such as these have been found to be out of compliance with hours of service regulations as set forth by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, and their failure to comply with those regulations ultimately results in death and catastrophic injury to unsuspecting motorists. The first hours of service regulations were put in place by the Interstate Commerce Commission in 1937. The need for these regulations came from research that indicated driver fatigue could be a major factor in vehicle accidents. It was also discovered that many drivers were driving excessive hours between rest breaks, keeping them from getting the much needed rest. The regulations were meant to give drivers an opportunity to get the rest before driving commercial motor vehicles. Between 1937 and 2004, there was little change in hour service regulations. And with all the drivers being bound by these regulations, they often adulterated their logbooks so that they could drive more hours. Drivers even kept multiple logbooks in their trucks to fool DOT officers when they were pulled over. And in many cases, drivers would even fail to keep a logbook in their truck at all because the fine for not having a logbook was cheaper than having one that was out of compliance. In 1995, with the Interstate Commission Termination Act of 1995, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration was instructed to address fatigue-related motor carrier safety issues. In cases where the driver of commercial vehicle accidents are killed in the accident, it's hard to say for certain that the driver was in fact fatigued. However, by studying the driver's hours of service log, it could be determined whether or not the driver was in compliance with hours of service regulations. Even when drivers were not the cause of the accident, they can be fined, imprisoned, or both if it's discovered that they failed to follow regulations. It's been said in many cases that if they were in compliance with those regulations, then they wouldn't have even been at the scene of the accident. Since 2004, there have been a number of changes in the hours of service regulations, making it what it is today. Currently, for most truck drivers, the regulations are pretty standard. Property carrying drivers may drive a maximum of 11 hours following a 10-hour break. Drivers may not drive beyond the 14th consecutive hour of coming on duty. It's not to say that they can't work more than that 14 hours, but they can't drive after that 14th hour on duty. Drivers may only drive if 8 hours or less have passed since their last off-duty period of at least 30 minutes. In other words, you need to take a 30-minute break within your 8-hour period in order to continue driving. Drivers may not drive after 60 hours within a 7 consecutive day period or 70 hours in an 8 consecutive day period. Driver may restart a 7 or 8 day consecutive period after taking 34 hours off duty. Unless, of course, they're oil field drivers. They do get an exception where they only need to take 24 hours off. In conclusion, for over 80 years, the federal government has been trying to reduce injuries and deaths by regulating hours of service for commercial motor vehicles and commercial drivers. And though there have been quite a few changes during that time, there were still deadly accidents that resulted from drivers operating while they were fatigued. Some due to drivers manipulating their logs so that they could drive a little longer or make a little more money, or simply just get home a little bit earlier than they planned to. Many companies have even encouraged their drivers to lie or cheat on their logs so that they could get more work done. I have first-hand experience with those types of companies. They ran us as hard as they could possibly get away with. I've even been forced to remain on duty without rest for as long as 42 hours straight. My first field driving job, where I was hauling chemicals and industrial waste, almost killed me. As a matter of fact, the guy that took my job and took over my truck after I left this company was dead within 2 months, and I have no doubt in my mind what the cause of his death was. My first day on this job lasted 22 hours without a break. I should have got it by then, took off while I had the chance. After that, 16 to 28 hour days were the norm rather than the exception. Regardless of how the hours of service are recorded, there will always be somebody out there trying to figure out how to cheat the system. And it's been my experience with electronic logging that it is no easy task. The new ELD mandate will definitely make it more difficult to cheat. It will definitely make it much easier for employers and DOT officials to manage driver logs and to address their violations. Even with fines reaching almost $3,000 per offense, some drivers still believe they simply will not get caught. The enforcement of electronic logging devices will ensure that those drivers will eventually have to answer for their transgressions. Will these new devices and regulations really protect drivers and save lives? Only time will tell. Meanwhile, I'll continue to do my part in trying to save the lives of my co-workers and the public that we share our highways with. Thank you very much.